The sun had begun its slow descent, painting the sky with streaks of orange and pink as the day transitioned into evening. The air was calm, carrying the faint scent of blooming flowers from nearby gardens. Birds chirped softly in the distance, and the occasional hum of a passing car broke the otherwise serene atmosphere. It was one of those evenings that felt almost magical, quiet, peaceful, and full of possibility. Maya Johnson sat on the wooden steps of her modest porch, her sketchbook resting on her lap. Her pencil moved effortlessly across the page, capturing the beauty of the sunset in intricate detail. She loved moments like these, when time seemed to slow down just enough for her to breathe and create. Art had always been her escape, her way of expressing emotions she sometimes struggled to put into words. Tonight she was drawing a scene inspired by the horizon, a blend of fiery reds, deep purples, and golden yellows swirling together like a dream. Her long braids framed her face as she leaned slightly forward, completely absorbed in her work. Occasionally she paused to glance up at the sky, ensuring her colors matched the real thing. A gentle breeze brushed against her skin, making her smile. Life wasn't perfect, but in moments like this, it felt close. Unbeknownst to Maya, trouble was brewing just around the corner. Two police officers, Ray Dalton and Carl Huxley, were patrolling the neighborhood in their marked squad car. They weren't particularly well liked in the community. Whispers about their behavior often circulated among residents. Some said they targeted people based on the color of their skin, while others claimed they used excessive force during routine stops. No one dared to confront them directly, though. After all, challenging authority could lead to more problems than solutions. As they drove through the streets, Officer Dalton spotted Maya sitting on her porch. His lips curled into a smirk as he nudged his partner. "Look at that," he said, nodding toward her. "What's she doing out here? Doesn't look like she belongs." Officer Huxley squinted, then shrugged. "Who knows? Maybe she's up to something. Let's check it out." Without hesitation, they pulled over to the curb, parking their car directly in front of Maya's house. The sudden appearance of the patrol vehicle startled her. She looked up from her sketchbook, confused. Why were they stopping here? Had something happened? Before she could process what was going on, the two officers stepped out of the car and approached her with an air of authority that bordered on intimidation. Their boots clicked against the pavement, and their belts jingled with every step. Maya instinctively closed her sketchbook and stood up, clutching it to her chest. "Evening," Officer Dalton said gruffly, his tone far from friendly. "What are you doing out here?" Maya blinked, taken aback by the question. "I live here," she replied politely, gesturing toward the house behind her. "I'm just drawing." Dalton raised an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced. "Drawing, huh? You got ID?" Her heart sank. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. She'd done nothing wrong. She was simply enjoying her evening. Still, she reached into her pocket and pulled out her wallet, handing over her driver's license. "Here," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "My name is Maya Johnson. I live at 1428 Maple Street. That's my house right there." Instead of examining the ID carefully, Officer Huxley snatched it from her hand and gave it a quick glance before handing it back. "You sure about that?" he asked skeptically. "We've had some reports of suspicious activity in this area lately. People matching your description." "My description?" Maya repeated, frowning. "I don't understand. What does that even mean?" Dalton crossed his arms, his expression hardening. "You know exactly what I mean. Now why don't you tell us what you're really doing out here?" By now, a few neighbors had started to notice the commotion. Mrs. Alvarez, who lived next door, peeked out from behind her curtains, concern etched on her face. Across the street, Mr. Thompson, a retired judge, paused mid-walk with his dog, watching the scene unfold. Even Tariq, a teenage boy known for his tech-savvy skills, stopped tinkering with his laptop on his own porch to see what was happening. Maya felt a lump form in her throat. She didn't want to cause a scene or make anyone worry, but she also knew she hadn't done anything to deserve this treatment. "I already told you," she said firmly, though her voice trembled slightly. "I live here. I'm not doing anything wrong." But the officers weren't listening. Instead, they exchanged a knowing look, as if silently agreeing on their next move. Without warning, Officer Dalton grabbed Maya's arm and twisted it behind her back, forcing her to bend over. Pain shot through her shoulder and she cried out in surprise. "What are you doing?" she exclaimed, struggling to break free. "I haven't done anything." "Stop resisting," Huxley barked, pulling a pair of handcuffs from his belt. Within seconds, Maya found herself restrained, her hands cuffed tightly behind her back. Tears welled up in her eyes as humiliation washed over her. How could this be happening? She lived here. She was innocent. And yet, these men were treating her like a criminal. The growing audience of neighbors watched in stunned silence, unsure of what to do. Some clenched their fists in anger while others whispered nervously among themselves. No one wanted to intervene, not yet. But the tension in the air was palpable. Something had to give. And somewhere, deep within the fabric of fate, the first threads of karma began to weave themselves together. The sight of Maya being handcuffed on her own porch sent shockwaves through the small crowd of onlookers. Neighbors exchanged worried glances, unsure whether to intervene or stay silent. The two officers, however, seemed unfazed by the attention they were drawing. In fact, their behavior only grew more aggressive as they tried to assert control over the situation. Officer Dalton tightened the handcuffs around Maya's wrists, ignoring her sharp intake of breath. "You think we don't know what you're up to?" he sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. "People like you always have something to hide." "People like me?" Maya repeated, her voice trembling but defiant. She turned her head slightly to look at him, her dark eyes filled with a mix of pain and confusion. "What does that even mean? I haven't done anything wrong." Her words fell on deaf ears. Officer Huxley stepped closer, his posture towering and intimidating. He glanced at her sketchbook, which had fallen to the ground when she was forced down. Without asking permission, he picked it up and flipped through the pages. His lips curled into a smirk as he held up one of the drawings, a vibrant depiction of the sunset she had been working on. "This is your alibi, huh?" he said mockingly, waving the page in front of her face. "Drawing pretty pictures while everyone else works hard? Real convincing." Maya's cheeks burned with embarrassment and frustration. Her art was deeply personal, a reflection of her thoughts, dreams, and emotions. To see it dismissed so callously felt like a punch to the gut. "That's my work," she said firmly, trying to keep her composure. "It's not a crime to draw." Huxley chuckled, crumpling the page into a tight ball and tossing it aside, like trash. "Maybe not," he replied, his tone laced with sarcasm. "But hanging out here alone sure looks suspicious. You better start explaining yourself before things get worse." Maya bit her lip, fighting back tears. She knew arguing would only make them angrier, but staying silent felt unbearable. Every fiber of her being wanted to scream, to demand justice, to remind them that she was standing on her own property, minding her own business. But she also knew that angering men like this could escalate the situation further. So instead, she took a shaky breath and tried to reason with them again. "I already told you I live here," she said slowly, enunciating each word for emphasis. "I'm not doing anything illegal. If you need proof, ask anyone. My neighbors can vouch for me." Dalton snorted, clearly unimpressed. "Oh, we'll ask all right," he said, glancing toward the growing group of spectators. "But first, we're taking you in for questioning. Maybe a little time in the station will jog your memory." At those words, a murmur rippled through the crowd. Mrs. Alvarez, who had been watching from her window, finally stepped outside, clutching her shawl tightly around her shoulders. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice wavering but determined. "What's going on here? This girl lives here. I see her every day." Dalton shot her a glare, his jaw tightening. "Ma'am, this is police business. Stay out of it unless you want trouble." Mrs. Alvarez hesitated, fear flickering across her face. But she didn't back down completely. Instead, she crossed her arms and stood her ground, joining the other neighbors who were now gathering closer to the scene. Among them was Mr. Thompson, the retired judge who had retrieved his phone and was discreetly recording everything. Across the street, Tariq watched intently, his fingers flying across the keyboard of his laptop. He had set up a live stream using a security camera mounted on his house, capturing the entire incident in high definition. His younger sister, Amina, peered over his shoulder, her wide eyes reflecting both shock and determination. "They can't do this," Amina whispered urgently. "It's not fair." Tariq nodded grimly. "Don't worry," he muttered under his breath. "If they try to take her away, I'll make sure the whole world sees what's happening." Meanwhile, Maya struggled to maintain her dignity, despite the overwhelming sense of helplessness washing over her. The cold metal of the handcuffs dug into her skin, and the weight of the officer's accusations pressed heavily on her chest. She couldn't believe this was real, that in the span of just a few minutes her peaceful evening had turned into a nightmare. As the tension escalated, Officer Huxley opened the door to the patrol car, gesturing for Maya to get inside. "Let's go," he barked, grabbing her arm roughly. "Time to take a ride." "No," Maya protested, pulling away instinctively. "I haven't done anything wrong. Please let me go." Her plea caught the attention of another neighbor, Ms. Patel, who ran a small bakery down the block. She hurried over, holding a tray of freshly baked cookies she had been preparing for tomorrow's sale. "Officers, please," she pleaded, her voice soft but firm. "This girl is part of our community. She's a good person. Whatever you think she's done, you're mistaken." Huxley rolled his eyes, clearly irritated by the interference. "Lady, we don't need lectures from you. Just step back and let us do our job." But Ms. Patel didn't move. Instead, she placed the tray of cookies on the hood of the patrol car, symbolically refusing to leave until the situation was resolved. Her quiet act of defiance inspired others to speak up as well. One by one, voices began to rise from the crowd, each person adding their support for Maya. "She's telling the truth," someone shouted. "You're harassing an innocent girl." Another chimed in. The officers shifted uncomfortably, sensing that they were losing control of the narrative. Dalton glanced at Huxley, his confidence wavering. "We should wrap this up," he muttered under his breath. "Things are getting out of hand." But before they could respond, a new voice cut through the chaos. It was Mr. Thompson, his tone calm yet authoritative. "Gentlemen," he said, stepping forward with his phone still recording, "I suggest you reconsider your actions. I've captured everything on video, and trust me, the public won't take kindly to what I'm seeing here." The officers froze, their bravado crumbling under the weight of his words. They exchanged a nervous glance, realizing too late that their reckless behavior had been documented, not just by Mr. Thompson, but likely by countless others in the neighborhood. Security cameras perched on rooftops, smartphones filming surreptitiously, and social media platforms waiting to amplify the story. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Maya, still cuffed and trembling, looked around at the faces surrounding her. Though she was scared, she couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. These were her neighbors, people who barely spoke to her on most days, but now they were standing together, united against injustice. And somewhere deep within the universe, the wheels of karma continued to turn, setting the stage for what would come next. The moment Mr. Thompson stepped forward with his phone, the dynamic of the entire situation shifted. The two officers, who had been so confident and domineering just moments before, suddenly looked unsure of themselves. Their earlier bravado seemed to crumble under the weight of accountability. Officer Dalton's eyes darted nervously between the growing crowd and the glowing screen of Mr. Thompson's phone, while Officer Huxley instinctively took a step back, his grip on Maya loosening slightly. "I'm recording everything, Mr." Thompson repeated, his voice calm but firm. He held up the phone for emphasis, ensuring both officers could see it clearly. "And I've already sent this footage to my contacts at the station. You might want to think carefully about your next move." His words hung in the air like thunderclouds, heavy with implication. The officers exchanged another uneasy glance, their confidence visibly faltering. For years they had operated under the assumption that no one would dare challenge them, that their badges granted them immunity from consequences. But now, surrounded by neighbors armed with smartphones and security cameras, they were faced with an undeniable truth. They were being watched. Before either officer could respond, Tariq, the tech-savvy teenager from across the street, decided to add fuel to the fire. Stepping closer to the scene, he raised his laptop high above his head, its screen displaying a live feed of the incident captured by multiple cameras in the area. "Yeah, and we've got you on camera too," he announced boldly, his youthful voice cutting through the tension. "Every house on this block has smart devices. If you try anything shady, trust me, the internet will know within seconds." A collective murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Neighbors nodded in support, some even raising their phones to join the documentation effort. Mrs. Alvarez clapped her hands together, emboldened by the growing momentum. "That's right," she exclaimed. "You can't bully us anymore. We're not afraid to stand up for what's right." Maya, still, handcuffed and trembling, felt a surge of relief wash over her. She wasn't alone anymore. These were her neighbors, people she saw every day but rarely interacted with. And yet here they were, standing shoulder to shoulder, refusing to let injustice go unchecked. It was as if the entire neighborhood had awakened to a shared sense of purpose, united by a desire for fairness and respect. Officer Huxley, clearly flustered, tried to regain control of the situation. "Look," he stammered, his voice tinged with desperation. "We're just doing our job. Someone reported suspicious activity, and we're investigating." "Suspicious activity?" Ms. Patel interjected, her tone sharp with disbelief. "She was sitting on her own porch drawing. Are you telling me that's a crime now?" The crowd erupted in murmurs of agreement, their voices rising in unison. "Shame on you," someone shouted. "Let her go." Dalton clenched his jaw, clearly frustrated but unable to ignore the mounting pressure. He leaned in closer to Huxley, lowering his voice so only his partner could hear. "This is getting out of hand," he muttered urgently. "We need to figure something out. Fast." But karma wasn't done yet. Just as the officers began whispering to each other, trying to strategize their next move, Tariq's younger sister Amina ran up to the group, breathless and clutching her phone. "Big brother," she called out, tugging on Tariq's sleeve. "I did what you told me to do. I sent the video to the news channels." Tariq's eyes widened in surprise, then lit up with pride. "What? Already?" he asked, glancing at his sister. "Yes," Amina replied, nodding enthusiastically. "They said they'll post it online soon." The officers froze, their faces pale with panic. They knew exactly what that meant. Their actions would be broadcast to thousands, maybe even millions of people. There would be no hiding, no denying what they had done. The very thought of facing public scrutiny made their stomachs churn. Sensing their vulnerability, Mr. Thompson seized the opportunity to press further. "Gentlemen," he said, stepping closer, his tone authoritative yet measured, "you have two choices. You can release Maya immediately, apologize for your behavior, and accept responsibility for your actions. Or you can continue down this path and deal with the fallout. Trust me when I say the consequences will be severe." For a long moment, there was silence. The officers stood frozen, their minds racing as they weighed their options. On one hand, releasing Maya meant admitting defeat, losing face in front of the crowd, and potentially facing disciplinary action from their superiors. On the other hand, persisting with their plan would almost certainly lead to widespread outrage, media coverage, and possibly even criminal charges. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Officer Dalton sighed heavily and gestured toward Maya. "Fine," he muttered begrudgingly, avoiding eye contact with anyone. "Uncuff her." Huxley hesitated for a second, then reluctantly complied, fumbling with the keys to unlock the handcuffs. As the metal restraints fell away from her wrists, Maya winced, rubbing the sore spots where they had dug into her skin. Tears streamed down her face, not just from the physical pain but from the overwhelming emotions coursing through her. Relief, anger, gratitude, and exhaustion all collided at once, leaving her drained, but determined. "You should be ashamed of yourselves," Mrs. Alvarez scolded, shaking her head in disgust. "This poor girl hasn't done anything wrong. How dare you treat her like this?" The officers didn't respond. Instead, they backed away slowly, their heads bowed in shame. Without another word, they climbed into their patrol car and sped off, tires squealing as they disappeared around the corner. The crowd erupted into cheers and applause, celebrating the small victory they had achieved together. As the adrenaline began to fade, Maya sank onto the steps of her porch, overwhelmed by everything that had just happened. Her neighbors gathered around her, offering hugs, kind words, and reassurances. Ms. Patel handed her a cookie from the tray she had brought earlier, smiling warmly. "Here, sweetie," she said gently. "You deserve something sweet after all this." Mr. Thompson knelt beside her, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You handled yourself with incredible grace and courage," he told her sincerely. "Don't ever forget how strong you are." Maya managed a weak smile, though her heart still ached from the ordeal. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I couldn't have done it without all of you." The sun had nearly set by now, casting the neighborhood in a soft twilight glow. Despite the chaos of the evening, there was a newfound sense of unity among the residents. Strangers who had once kept to themselves were now exchanging numbers, promising to stay connected and look out for one another. Even Tariq and Amina lingered nearby, grinning proudly as they monitored the online reactions to the video they had shared. In the hours that followed, the story spread like wildfire. News outlets picked up the footage, sharing clips of the incident, alongside interviews with witnesses. Social media platforms buzzed with hashtags like Justice for Maya and Enough is Enough, amplifying calls for accountability and reform. Messages of support poured in from across the country, with strangers praising Maya's resilience and condemning the officer's behavior. Though the road ahead would undoubtedly be challenging, Maya found solace in knowing she wasn't alone. Her community had rallied around her, proving that even in the darkest moments light could shine through. And as karma continued its work, the ripple effects of this single evening would inspire change far beyond Maple Street. The aftermath of the incident unfolded like a storm that refused to die down. Within hours, the video Tariq and Amina had shared online went viral, sparking outrage and conversations across social media platforms. News outlets scrambled to cover the story, interviewing witnesses, experts, and even Maya herself. The footage was everywhere, on television screens, laptops, and smartphones, forcing people to confront uncomfortable truths about systemic racism, police misconduct, and the power of community solidarity. Maya woke up the next morning to find her phone flooded with notifications. Messages poured in from friends, family, and even strangers who had seen the video. Some expressed sympathy and admiration for her courage, while others offered words of encouragement or asked how they could help. For every hateful comment questioning her innocence, there were dozens more filled with kindness and support. It was overwhelming, but also strangely comforting. Her parents, who lived out of state, called early that morning, their voices trembling with worry. "Are you okay?" her mother asked, tears evident in her tone. "Why didn't you tell us what happened?" "I'm fine, Mom," Maya reassured her, though her voice cracked under the weight of everything she'd been through. "It all happened so fast, but I think things are going to be okay." Her father chimed in, his voice firm but gentle. "We're proud of you, sweetheart. You stood your ground when it mattered most. We'll figure this out together." Their words brought tears to Maya's eyes, not just because of their love, but because she realized how much strength her family gave her. She promised to keep them updated as events unfolded, then hung up, feeling a mix of gratitude and exhaustion. Meanwhile, the officers at the center of the controversy faced swift repercussions. By mid-morning, both Officer Dalton and Officer Huxley were placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation. Their names and faces appeared in headlines alongside screenshots of the viral video, turning them into symbols of unchecked authority and prejudice. Calls for their dismissal grew louder by the hour, with petitions circulating online demanding accountability, not just for them, but for the broader issues within law enforcement. At the precinct, tensions ran high. Fellow officers whispered nervously, in hallways, unsure whether to defend their colleagues or distance themselves from the controversy. The chief of police held a press conference later that day, attempting to strike a balance between acknowledging public concerns and defending the integrity of his department. "This is a deeply troubling situation," he said, standing behind a podium flanked by microphones. "If misconduct occurred, rest assured that justice will prevail. However, we must allow due process to take its course before jumping to conclusions." His carefully worded statement did little to quell the anger simmering among activists and community leaders. Protesters gathered outside the station holding signs that read, "No justice, no peace, and accountability now." Chants echoed through the streets as hundreds marched peacefully, demanding systemic change. Back in Maya's neighborhood, life began to settle into a new rhythm. Neighbors continued to check on her throughout the day, bringing food, flowers, and heartfelt notes of encouragement. Mrs. Alvarez baked trays of empanadas, insisting that Maya needed to eat well during such a stressful time. Mr. Thompson stopped by to offer legal advice, explaining his connections with civil rights attorneys, who specialized in cases like hers. Even Tariq and Amina visited, proudly showing off the thousands of views their live stream had garnered. "You're a hero, Maya," Tariq said earnestly, adjusting his glasses. "People are talking about what happened here, about how brave you were, and how everyone came together to stand up for you." Maya smiled faintly, touched by his words. "I don't feel like a hero," she admitted. "I just wanted to sit on my porch and draw. I never imagined something like this would happen." Amina nodded vigorously. "That's why it's so important," she said, her youthful enthusiasm shining through. "Because it shouldn't have happened at all. And now maybe other people won't let stuff like this slide anymore." As the days turned into weeks, the momentum only grew stronger. Local organizations hosted town hall meetings to discuss policing reform, inviting residents to share their experiences and propose solutions. Maya attended several of these gatherings, speaking candidly about her ordeal and urging others to stay vigilant. Her quiet yet powerful presence inspired many to speak up about their own encounters with discrimination, fostering a sense of unity and purpose. Artists from around the country took notice too. Murals dedicated to Maya began appearing in cities, nationwide, each one capturing her resilience and the spirit of resistance. One mural, painted on the side of a community center in Chicago, depicted Maya sitting on her porch with a pencil in hand, surrounded by blooming flowers and rays of sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Beneath it, bold letters spelled out, "Drawn together by justice." In interviews, Maya emphasized the importance of channeling anger into action. "What happened to me wasn't fair," she told one reporter. "But if it helps spark change, if it makes people realize we need better systems and more accountability, then maybe something good can come out of it." Her message resonated deeply, inspiring countless individuals to get involved. Fundraisers were organized to support Maya's education and future endeavors, raising tens of thousands of dollars in just a few days. Artists collaborated to create an exhibition featuring works inspired by her story titled "Breaking Chains." Proceeds from ticket sales and merchandise went toward scholarships for young creators from marginalized communities. For officers Dalton and Huxley, the consequences of their actions became increasingly unbearable. Internal affairs investigators uncovered a pattern of misconduct, stretching back years, including numerous complaints filed against them by members of the community. Facing mounting pressure from both the public and higher-ups within the department, they ultimately resigned, their careers reduced to cautionary tales. Yet karma wasn't finished with them. Once respected figures in their field, they found themselves ostracized not only by former colleagues, but also by friends and acquaintances who distanced themselves after the scandal broke. Job prospects dwindled as news of their behavior followed them wherever they went. In a cruel twist of fate, the very authority they had wielded so recklessly became a source of shame and isolation. As for Maya, she slowly began to rebuild her life. Though scars remained, both physical and emotional, she refused to let bitterness consume her. Instead, she channeled her energy into her art, using it as a tool for healing and advocacy. Her sketches evolved into powerful visual narratives, exploring themes of identity, resilience, and hope. Galleries clamored to showcase her work, recognizing its ability to provoke thought and inspire action. One evening, months after the incident, Maya returned to her porch, sketchbook in hand. The sun was setting once again, casting golden hues across the sky. This time, however, she wasn't alone. Friends, neighbors, and supporters joined her, celebrating the progress they had made together. Laughter and conversation filled the air, replacing the tension that had once gripped the street. As Maya looked around at the faces of those who had stood by her, she felt a profound sense of gratitude. They had transformed a moment of injustice into a movement for change, a testament to the power of unity and perseverance. And though challenges undoubtedly lay ahead, she knew they would face them together, drawing strength from one another. Diri. Sun dipped below the horizon, signaling the end of another day. But for Maya and her community, it marked the beginning of something greater, a brighter, more hopeful chapter shaped by courage, compassion, and collective resolve. Months had passed since the night that changed everything, but its impact lingered like ripples in a pond, spreading far beyond what anyone could have imagined. Maya's life was no longer defined solely by the incident on her porch. Instead, it became a turning point, a catalyst for growth, transformation, and purpose. The neighborhood she called home had also evolved, shaped by the collective resolve of its residents to build something stronger and more united than before. The art exhibition titled Breaking Chains opened on a crisp autumn evening, drawing crowds from all over the city. The gallery buzzed with energy as visitors moved from one piece to another, each artwork telling a story of struggle, resilience, and hope. Maya stood near the entrance, dressed in a simple yet elegant outfit, her braids tied back neatly. She greeted attendees with a warm smile, though there was a quiet strength in her eyes that spoke volumes about the journey she'd been through. One of the first pieces people encountered was a large mural inspired by the viral video. It depicted Maya sitting on her porch surrounded by shadowy figures meant to represent the officers who had wronged her. But instead of portraying her as a victim, the artist had painted her with a radiant aura, almost like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Beneath the mural were words written in bold letters, "Courage is contagious." As guests explored the exhibit, they discovered works created by artists from diverse backgrounds, each paying homage to Maya's story while addressing broader themes of injustice and empowerment. One painting showed a young girl holding a protest sign, her face illuminated by candlelight. Another featured a mosaic of hands reaching out to support one another, symbolizing community solidarity. Every piece carried a message, some subtle, others overt, but all resonated deeply with those who viewed them. Maya wandered through the gallery, pausing occasionally to listen to conversations or answer questions. Many attendees thanked her, personally sharing how her courage had inspired them to take action in their own lives. A middle-aged woman approached her, tears glistening in her eyes. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said softly. "Your story gave me the push I needed to speak up at work when I saw unfair treatment happening. You reminded me that silence isn't always safe, it can be complicity." Maya nodded, touched by the sincerity in the woman's voice. "That means so much to hear," she replied. "Change starts small, with everyday choices. If my story helps even one person stand up for what's right, then it's worth it." By the end of the night, the event had raised thousands of dollars for scholarships aimed at supporting young artists from marginalized communities. Local news outlets covered the exhibition extensively, praising Maya not only for her talent but also for her role as an advocate for justice. Her name became synonymous with resilience, and invitations poured in for speaking engagements, interviews, and collaborations. Despite the newfound attention, Maya remained grounded, leaning on her loved ones and neighbors for support. Mrs. Alvarez continued to bring food whenever Maya seemed overwhelmed, insisting it was her way of contributing to the cause. Mr. Thompson offered guidance on navigating media appearances, reminding her to stay true to herself. Even Tariq and Amina stayed involved, helping manage her growing social media presence and ensuring her voice reached as many people as possible. But perhaps the most profound change occurred within the neighborhood itself. What had once been a quiet, somewhat disconnected community transformed into a tight-knit network of allies. Residents installed additional security cameras and formed a neighborhood watch group, determined to prevent similar incidents from happening again. They organized regular meetings to discuss safety concerns and brainstorm ways to foster inclusivity. Slowly but surely, trust began to rebuild, not just among neighbors but also between the community and local authorities. The police department underwent significant reforms following the scandal. Under intense public scrutiny, leadership implemented mandatory training programs focused on cultural sensitivity and de-escalation techniques. Community liaisons were appointed to bridge gaps between officers and residents, fostering open dialogue and mutual understanding. While skepticism remained, especially among those who had witnessed or experienced discrimination firsthand, there was cautious optimism that real change might finally be taking root. For Officers Dalton and Huxley, life took a drastically different turn. Their resignation marked the beginning of a long fall from grace. Unable to find employment in law enforcement or any field requiring trust and integrity, they struggled to adapt to life outside the badge. Former colleagues avoided them, embarrassed by their association with such blatant misconduct. Friends distanced themselves, unwilling to defend behavior that had sparked nationwide outrage. Their isolation extended beyond professional circles. Family members expressed disappointment and frustration, questioning how two men entrusted with protecting others could act so recklessly. Over time, the weight of their actions, and the loss of everything they had worked for, began to wear on them. Rumors circulated that both men sought counseling to cope with guilt and shame, though neither publicly acknowledged their mistakes. Meanwhile, Maya embraced her role as an advocate, using her platform to amplify voices often overlooked. In discussions about systemic inequality, she traveled to schools, universities, and community centers, delivering talks that blended personal anecdotes with calls to action. Her speeches emphasized the importance of allyship, urging people to educate themselves, challenge biases, and actively participate in creating a fairer society. Art remained her primary form of expression, however. In addition to completing commissioned pieces, she began mentoring young artists, teaching them how to use creativity as a tool for advocacy. Together, they launched a project called Voices Unbound, which showcased artworks highlighting underrepresented perspectives. Exhibits popped up in galleries, parks, and online platforms, reaching audiences worldwide. On the anniversary of the incident, Maya returned to her porch once again. This time, it wasn't just her sketchbook she brought along. It was a canvas, larger than any she'd worked on before. Neighbors gathered around, cheering her on as she dipped her brush into vibrant hues of red, orange, and gold. With every stroke, she painted a sunrise bursting over a horizon dotted with silhouettes of hands clasped together in unity. When the final touches were complete, Maya stepped back to admire her work. The crowd erupted into applause, their cheers echoing through the now familiar streets. Someone handed her a microphone, inviting her to say a few words. "I never thought this little porch would become a symbol of anything," she began, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. "But tonight, it feels like proof that even in our darkest moments we can create light. We can come together, lift each other up, and demand better, not just for ourselves but for everyone." Her words hung in the air, met with nods, smiles, and murmurs of agreement. As fireworks lit up the sky to mark the occasion, Maya felt a deep sense of peace. The scars of the past hadn't disappeared entirely, but they no longer defined her. Instead, they served as reminders of where she had been and how far she had come. In the months and years that followed, Maple Street continued to thrive as a beacon of hope and resilience. New murals adorned walls, celebrating diversity and unity. Community events brought people together, fostering connections that transcended differences. And Maya, ever the artist, kept creating, not just for herself, but for a world that desperately needed beauty, truth, and inspiration. Through it all, one thing remained clear. Karma, in its infinite wisdom, had delivered justice, not through vengeance but through transformation. What had started as an act of cruelty ended as a testament to the power of courage, compassion, and collective action. And as Maya looked toward the future, she knew the best was yet to come.